Hello, this is Candy with eyes2jesus.blogspot.com, and welcome as we continue on our study going through the book of Isaiah. Today we're up to Isaiah chapter 37. If you are just joining me for the first time, don't feel pressured to have to go back and watch the previous videos, the previous chapters. If you would like to, that's great, but if you just want to jump right here in the middle, that is fine too. There might be some things that you might not catch if you're not familiar with Isaiah because we build off of them, but you can still get the general gist, and I hope that you will join us either way. If you would like to follow along in the same Bible translation that I am using the Young's Literal Translation. You can get hard copies of it from places like christianbook.com, biblegateway.com, and amazon.com. You can also read this for free online in various places or through various free apps or online at biblegateway.com. So let's get started. This is a long chapter, but oh my goodness, the stuff in this chapter is amazing. And I just really want to drive home the fact that what we're going to be reading in this chapter is on the historical record through many various different ancient peoples. It is verified to be true and accurate. And the beauty of that is this chapter proves that Jehovah God is the one true God. And this is all in the history. So it's fascinating. So I'm going to pop on my reading glasses and let's go ahead and turn in our Bibles to Isaiah chapter 37 and beginning in verse 1. And it cometh to pass at the king... Okay, so let's back up. Let's back up to the last verse just to get our context, okay? So in the previous chapter, we had a message sent by Rabshakeh from King Sennacherib of Assyria, which is Ashur, basically ridiculing Jehovah God, saying Jehovah God's not going to save them. They might as well just give in because Ashur or Assyria is going to take them down. So now the people who received that message brought it to King Hezekiah. Okay, so verse 22 of chapter 36 says, And Eliakim son of Hilkiah, who is over the house, cometh in, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah son of Asaph the remembrancer, unto Hezekiah with great garments, and they declared to him the words of Rabshakeh. Okay, so now verse 1 of chapter 37. And it cometh to pass at the king Hezekiah's hearing that he rendeth his garments and covereth himself with sackcloth and entereth the house of the Lord. Rending his garments, that means he tore his clothes and then he dressed himself in sackcloth, which is kind of a rough burlap type of texture cloth. And that was a Middle East custom of extreme mourning. You tear your clothes and then you may then replace them with some burlap clothes to wear instead. Shows extreme mourning and distress. And then it says that he entered the house of Jehovah. Now, he didn't go into the holiest place or the Holy of Holies, but he went at least to the outer court. And there he went to pray and seek the Lord God for guidance. And that's what we should do when rough times come, when bad news comes, when it looks like it's impossible, because it was looking impossible to him. It was looking like that Ashur was going to completely destroy the house of Judah. He went to God. And that's what we should do too. Verse 2. And sendeth Eliakim, who is over the house, and Shebna the scribe, and the elders of the priests, covering themselves with sackcloth, unto Isaiah, son of Amoz, the prophet. So now he's sending messengers to Isaiah the prophet. He's praying to God, and he's saying, now I want you guys to go to Isaiah and see if he has a word from the Lord for us about this. Verse 3. And they say unto him, Thus said Hezekiah, a day of distress and rebuke and despising is this day. For come, have sons unto the birth, and power there is not to bear. So that's a type of idiom, a saying that so much distress. It's being comparable to child labor. But when it comes time to actually push the child out, something goes wrong and the mother no longer has any strength and the body goes weak. The uterus muscle, which can push by itself, becomes weak. It's overstrained, and the baby can't be pushed out, and that used to end in the result being death of the mother and child. So they're saying this is so horrible. It's like a birth gone wrong, that had this hard labor up to it, and then the mother and child died. So they're saying, unless God intervenes, we're destroyed. Okay, verse 4. And then they continue speaking to Isaiah. They say, "It may be Jehovah thy God doth hear the words of Rabshakeh, with which the king of Ashur his Lord hath sent him to reproach the living God, and hath decided concerning the words that Jehovah thy God hath heard, and thou hast lifted up prayer for the remnant that is found." So they're saying, we're hoping that Jehovah God listened to the horrible words that Sennacherib sent via Rabshakeh as a message, basically saying, your God ain't going to save you. No one else's God saved you. Just give it up. Your God has no power. Neither do them. So they're hoping that God heard that, and that will inflame God's righteous anger to even more so save the house of Judah out of the hands of Ashur or of the Assyrians. All right, now just a side note too. A lot of Bible translations like the King James Version, they don't say Ashur, they say the Assyrians. But some Bible translations, especially the more literal ones, such as the Young's Literal Translation, you notice it says Ashur and not Assyrians. And that helps give us a tie if we study the ancient records to Ashur, because they were known as the people of Ashur, named after their main deity that they worshipped, which they named Ashur, which was called Ashur. And so they were the people of Ashur. So they became known as Ashur, or later became known as the Assyrians. And Ashur, the false god Ashur, he's the head of the Assyrian pantheon of false gods. So he is the same or synonymous with Zeus being the head of the pantheon of the Greek false gods. So by keeping the name Ashur here, that is what they were, but they did used to be called after their false god. You can then tie it into the other gods and the other lands and actually understand if you were to read some other ancient writings as well. So that's where we have Ashur. Okay, so now they just finished telling Isaiah what's going on. They want a word from the Lord. Okay, now notice at the end of verse 4 it says, and thou hast lifted up prayer for the remnant that is found. Now here the word remnant is a little bit different. For example, we have the word remnant used when Ashur took down the house of Israel, and that the minority who were true to Jehovah God, who kept their trust in Jehovah God, regardless of what they saw going around them, they were the remnant. They were able to stay in the desolated land and farm it and escape Ashur. So in this case, though, the remnant is in a broader scope. They're talking about all of Israel, all 12 tribes of Israel, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. All right. And so when they're talking about remnant, they're talking about how the house of Judah is now the remnant of the 12 tribes, because the house of Judah is a tribe of Judah, and then another tribe and parts of a few other tribes, but most of the other tribes, the other 10 tribes, are taken by Ashur. They are no longer in their land or considered a people at that point. So that means in the broad scope of the 12 tribes of Israel, it makes the house of Judah the remnant. And that's the definition of remnant here in this chapter, so that doesn't get confusing. So verse 5, and the servants of King Hezekiah come in unto Isaiah, and Isaiah saith unto them, thus do ye say unto your Lord. Now that's lowercase l. And so Lord here he's saying is, thus shall you say to King Hezekiah. Lord, lowercase l, Lord, just means an authoritative leader, one who has authority over you, and that's what King Hezekiah was. So you could alternate between using the term king or Lord. Okay, so thus do ye say unto your Lord. Thus said Jehovah, be not afraid because of the words that thou hast heard, with which the servants of the king of Ashur have reviled me. So God's saying, don't be afraid of what they say, and I know that they have reviled me. Be not afraid. Those are the first 3 words that God sends back to Hezekiah and to the house of Judah. Be not afraid. You know, the New Testament of the Bible says that perfect love casteth out fear. So, the New Testament also says we should be giving our fears, our troubles, and our anxieties to Jesus. So the Christian isn't called to walk in fear, and the people of God in the Old Covenant weren't called to walk in fear either. We're to walk in faith. If we are walking in the ways of Lord God, then we turn to Him when things seem impossible and absolutely horrendous. Be not afraid, put it into His hands. So here we go. Be not afraid because of the words that thou hast heard, with which the servants of the king of Ashur have reviled me. Lo, I am giving in him a spirit, and he hath heard a report, and hath turned back unto his land, and I have caused him to fall by the sword in his land. So God's saying, don't worry about it, okay? Because he's going to hear a report, he's going to go back to his land, and then he's going to fall by the sword there. So he's not going to take you down. Okay, so verse 8, here it happens. And Rabshakeh turneth back and findeth the king of Ashur fighting against Libnah, for he hath heard that he hath journeyed from Lachish. And he heareth concerning Tirhakah, king of Cush, saying, he hath come out to fight with thee. And he heareth and sendeth messengers unto Hezekiah, saying, okay, so Rabshakeh turned back, and he went to fight that other battle. But he didn't want Jerusalem to think that their God saved them. So he wanted to send them a letter saying, don't think that I forgot about you or that your God saved you. This is a little side issue that I'm taking care of. Then we'll be back, and we'll continue where we left off, and we will take you down. Okay, so he sends this message. All right, and in the message that he sends to King Hezekiah, starting in verse 10, says, thus do ye speak unto Hezekiah king of Judah, saying, let not thy God lift thee up in whom thou art trusting, saying, Jerusalem is not given into the hand of the king of Ashur. Lo, thou hast heard that which the kings of Ashur have done to all the lands, to devote them, and thou art delivered. Devote here means a holy killing. Verse 12. Did the gods of the nations deliver them whom my fathers destroyed? Gozan and Haram and Rezeph and the sons of Eden who are in Telessar. Where is the king of Hamath and the king of Arpad and the king of the city of Sepharvaim, Hena and Ivah? So again, he's listing just many of the lands that Ashur had taken down before Judah, saying, their gods didn't save them. We took them down easily. You guys will be a piece of cake. Okay, so then that was the end of the message. So Hezekiah, King Hezekiah's reaction to that, verse 14. And Hezekiah taketh the letters out of the hand of the messengers and readeth them. And Hezekiah goeth up to the house of Jehovah. He's going to the outer courts again to seek God. And Hezekiah spreadeth it before Jehovah. And Hezekiah prayeth unto Jehovah, saying, Jehovah of hosts. It's the first thing he says. So host means armies. So Jehovah of hosts, because he's talking about battle here, right? So Jehovah of hosts, God of Israel. Because remember, the scope of this chapter is the 12 tribes of Israel, that 10 of the tribes have been taken down, the house of Israel, have been taken down by Ashur. So now there's only a remnant of the 12 tribes of Israel left, that being the house of Judah. But he's the God of Israel, inhabiting the cherubs. So let's just do just a quick little side note on inhabiting the cherubs. Now, we read about many places in the Old Testament, including the book of Ezekiel, but also in the New Testament. For example, in Revelation chapter 5, verse 6, there are 4 cherubs. These are angelic-like beings, but they are not in human form. And there are 4 of them that surround the throne of God. Okay? But there used to be 5. There used to be a covering cherub that covered over the throne of God. And that covering cherub is Satan. He fell. He is no longer a covering cherub. And you can read about that in Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 14. So here where we see God of hosts, God of Israel, inhabiting the cherubs, that's referring to the 4 cherubs that surround his throne. Now, before Satan fell, Ezekiel chapter 28, he was a covering cherub. There were 5 cherubs with Satan at the top. So many conjecture that if you were to do an aerial view, you'd see the throne of God in the middle, and then above the throne of God would be Satan before his fall. Lucifer before his fall, and then he'd be at the top, and then you'd have the other 4 points, and it would look like a pointing up star. So when you see the pointing up pentagrams, what that originally was supposed to symbolize was that was their glorifying, the pagans glorifying Lucifer or Satan before his fall. Now when you see the upside down 5-pointed star or the upside down pentagram, that supposedly is to depict, you still have the 4 cherubs surrounding God's throne, but the covering cherub has now fallen and is no longer in that position. So that's just always been interesting to me if you get into the topic of the covering cherubs, there's actually a lot there. But anyways, back to verse 16. So Hezekiah's prayer, Jehovah of hosts, God of Israel, inhabiting the cherubs, thou art God himself, thyself alone. To all kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made the heavens and the earth. So he's saying, you're the only God, and you're the God to all kingdoms of the earth. It's not, oh, they have their God, they have their God, or today, oh, they have their belief, I have my belief. No, there is one truth. There is the truth. And there is only one God. There is the God. And he is the God of all, regardless if you choose to believe in him or not. Okay? And it also says that God, thou hast made the heavens and the earth. Not evolution. That's such a farce. You know, there's more evidence for creation than there is for evolution. It actually takes more faith to believe in evolution than to believe in scriptural Christianity when you actually look at the science. So verse 17, he continues with his prayer and he says, incline, O Jehovah, thine ear and hear. Open, O Jehovah, thine eyes and see. And hear thou all the words of Sennacherib that he hath sent to reproach the living God. So he's saying again, Sennacherib sent a message back to us. He's reproaching you again. Verse 18, truly, O Jehovah, kings of Ashur have laid waste all the lands and their land. So he's saying, yeah, truly, they have laid waste all of those lands and their lands. So they also laid waste the agriculture of those lands. Verse 19, so as to put their gods into fire. For they are no gods, but work of the hands of man, wood and stone, and they destroy them. So after Ashur would take a land and destroy its agriculture, they'd take the people off, they would destroy the land's agriculture, and they would burn the gods of that people. Okay, and then verse 20, and now, Jehovah our God, save us from his hand, and all kingdoms of the earth dost know that thou art Jehovah, thyself alone. This is one of the ways this chapter is evidence of the one true God, Jehovah God, because we read about how God saves Jerusalem, and this just isn't in the biblical record. This is in the historical record of many different ancient peoples, including the historical record of Ashur or of Assyria themselves. All right, so verse 21. So that's the end, by the way, of the prayer. Now, verse 21, God responds to the prayer through the prophet Isaiah. Verse 21, and Isaiah, son of Amos, sendeth unto Hezekiah, saying, thus said Jehovah, God of Israel, that which thou hast prayed unto me concerning Sennacherib, king of Ashur. This is the word that Jehovah spake concerning him. So this is the word that God's speaking concerning the king of Ashur and what's going to happen to Ashur. Trampled on thee, laughed at thee, hath the virgin daughter of Zion. Behind thee, shaken the head, hath the daughter of Jerusalem. He's saying not only, Sennacherib, are you not going to take down the house of Judah, but Judah is going to be victorious. They'll laugh at you and at your fall. Verse 23, whom hast thou reproached and reviled, and against whom lifted up the voice? Yea, thou dost lift up on high thine eyes against the Holy One of Israel. So God's addressing that Sennacherib kept reproaching and reviling the Lord God. Verse 24, by the hand of thy servants thou hast reviled the Lord, and sayest, in the multitude of my chariots I have come up to a high place of hills, the sides of Lebanon, and I cut down the height of its cedars, the choice of its firs, and I enter the high place of its extremity, the forest of its Carmel. So also King Sennacherib is very braggadocious about all the lands that Ashur has conquered. Just also a side note, you notice so often, most of the time in the Bible, when it mentions Lebanon, cedars are mentioned there too. Lebanon means land of cedars. Okay, verse 25. I have dug and drunk waters, and I dry up with the sole of my steps all floods of a bulwark. Hast thou not heard from afar? It I did from days of old that I formed it. Now I have brought it in, and it is to make desolate, ruinous heaps, fenced cities. And their inhabitants are feeble-handed. They were broken down and dried up. They have been the herb of the field, and the greenness of the tender grass, grass of the roofs, and blasted corn, before it hath risen up. So now God is responding, how the king of Ashur is saying, look at all these people that we've destroyed. And God's saying, look at all these people that I've brought judgment to. Verse 28, and thy sitting down and thy going out and thy coming in, I have known, and thy anger towards me. God is saying, yo, King Sennacherib, I know everything you do, everything you think, everything you feel. I know it all. And that's not just God's knowing of King Sennacherib, that's for us too. God knows you, regardless if you know him. He knows everything you think, everything you feel, everything you say, everything you do. You can't hide anything from God. And that's precisely what God is saying here to King Sennacherib. I know everything you've done. Even things that you thought you hid from everyone, I saw it. It's all laid open to me, says God. Verse 29. Because of thy anger towards me and thy noise, it came up into mine ears. I have put my hook in thy nose and my bridle in thy lips, and I have caused thee to turn back in the way in which thou camest. So the hook in the nose and the bridle in the lips, that's because that's how Ashur, they were very cruel. When they would drive people out of their land, of the lands they conquered, they would put a piercing or a fish hook through the captive's nose or lips or both, and then attach chains to them, and that's how they would make the people walk and have them all strung together. It wasn't no merciful handcuffs or ropes. They had their faces freshly pierced with chains going through the piercings. If they didn't walk fast enough, it pulled on those fresh piercings and it hurt pretty intensely. Verse 30, and this to thee is a sign. Flood of the year is self-grown, self-sown grain, and in the second year the spontaneous growth, and in the third year sow ye and reap, and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And it hath continued, the escaped of the house of Judah hath been left to take root, and it hath made fruit upward. So you think, because they would agriculturally destroy the lands that they would conquer as they took the people out, and God is saying, some of the food in these lands, of course, grows back on its own, somewhat wild. You can't destroy all the seed under the ground. So there will be remnant of that fruit that still sprouts up from under the ground. You can't destroy it all. So you think that you have destroyed 10 out of the 12 tribes of Israel, that you've taken them out of their land. There's a remnant. That remnant fruit growing up out of the ground is the house of Judah. Verse 31. And it hath continued, the escaped of the house of Judah that hath been left to take root beneath, and it hath made its fruit upward. Verse 32. For from Jerusalem goeth forth a remnant, and escape from Mount Zion. The zeal of Jehovah of hosts doth this. Therefore thus saith Jehovah concerning the king of Ashur, he doth not come in unto the city, nor doth he shoot there an arrow, nor doth he come before it with shield, nor doth he pour out against it a mount. So he's saying, guys, he isn't even going to step foot in this city. I've got you. Verse 34, in the way that he came in it he turneth back, and unto this city he doth not come in. An affirmation of Jehovah. Verse 35, and I have covered over this city to save it for mine own sake, and for the sake of David my servant. God's hand of protection is over them, much as God's hand of protection is over his children now. Verse 36, and a messenger of Jehovah. Okay, so anyways, that's the end of God's response. So now it's time to take action. All right, so by this point, we have the armies. They're coming back. They're surrounding Jerusalem. It's looking like it's going to be imminent. They're going to take over Jerusalem. They're going to storm it and take it down like they have everything else. But that's not what happens. Verse 36, and a messenger of Jehovah goeth out, and smiteth in the camp of Ashur 185,000. And men rise early in the morning, and lo, all of them are dead corpses. So 185,000 of the army, an angel sent from God, destroyed. So those who woke up the next morning and looked at the camp, they were surrounded. It was dead corpses everywhere. All these people were just dead. So it's not like it was this big, loud, vicious battle. They went to sleep. When they woke up, 185,000 of them were just dead. Surprise, surprise. Verse 37, and journey and go and turn back doth Sennacherib king of Ashur, and dwelleth in Nineveh. So the king of Ashur, he left, so he survived. He left and he went to Nineveh. Okay, now that's interesting that says Nineveh, because verse 38, and it cometh to pass, and this is actually historically some years later, and it cometh to pass, he, Sennacherib, is bowing himself in the house of Nisroch, his god, and Adremelech and Sharezer his sons have smitten him with the sword, and they have escaped to the land of Ararat, and Esarhaddon his son reigneth in his stead. So he went to Nineveh, and he worshipped the false god Nisroch. So I guess he saw that, I guess he determined that the Ashur god, their version of Zeus, wasn't working out for him. So he goes to the Nisroch god, okay? Nisroch is Nimrod. Nimrod is the originator of secret Babylon, where we have such false things, such as counterfeit Christianity, like Roman Catholicism. It's where we really have the beast system, the world system is being steered by this secret Babylon. Secret or mystery Babylon that we read about in Revelation chapter 17 and 18 originated with Nimrod. So he's going back to the source of all of the pantheons, of all of the fake gods. He's going back to the source of all religions. Because Christianity isn't a religion. Christianity is the truth. Religion involves doing stuff to hope you are in heaven. In Christianity, there is nothing you can do to go to heaven. Jesus did it for you. So Christianity isn't a religion because the work is already done. We don't do anything to earn heaven. Okay, so all religions lead to hell. And all religions originated with that god Nisroch and Nineveh that Sennacherib is visiting. Nisroch is Nimrod. Nimrod is the origin. So he thinks that by going to the origin, this God is going to be more powerful than the Jehovah God. I'm going to regain my power and I'm still going to take them down. But instead, two of his sons rise up and kill him. Now, it doesn't tell us why, but according to Jewish tradition, it is said that he had heard about how Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son to God. And of course, God stopped him and said, no, we don't do that. But it was a test. And he thought, oh, well, if Abraham was willing to do that, he says, look what I'm going to do for Nisroch. I'm going to sacrifice 2 of my sons. And then those 2 sons got word of it and went and killed him instead. And then they fled the land. Now, I don't know if that's what really happened or not, but Jewish tradition says that that's what happened. And that's interesting to ponder. It doesn't contradict the story at all. But it's not written in the scriptures, so so we may never know. But anyhow, this concludes our study of Isaiah chapter 37. I hope you will join me in our next Isaiah study when we do chapter 38, and have a blessed day.